Hey everybody, welcome to the Humanities Forum, a special Thursday afternoon edition of the forum. My name is Ian Bernhoft, I'm the Humanities Forum coordinator. It is put on by the Humanities program and aims to give you and the Providence College community a chance to deepen your intellectual engagement with big ideas, big thoughts, etc., outside the classroom. And I know you're technically in a classroom, but you're not in class right now. And something that I think is really cool about the forum, so we try to bring in scholars, journalists, artists, all these kind of people from around the world, and you get some like really remarkable people, right? So like last week we had this Harvard professor named Martin Novak, who's one of the world's leading evolutionary biologists. A couple weeks from now we have this English author named Paul Kingsnorth, who writes on technology, religion, the environment. He's got a book coming out, and it's one of those sort of the big books that people are excited about this fall. And today, as you'll hear when I hype him up properly in a minute or two, we've got one of the country's leading experts on constitutional law. And so it's great that you're here. There are three ground rules that I'm going to lay down to guide our time here. Which, by the way, we're going to have the talk first. There's probably 20 minutes of Q&A at the end. We wrap up right around 5:45. So rule number one is all those shimmering screens you got to put away. You got to bury them, turn them off, shut them down, etc. I know that some of you have to take notes for class or whatever. Science shows that you actually remember stuff better, and you learn more by having to take notes by hand. So when you're locked in and you have a really clear memory of what our speaker talked about today, you can thank me and you can thank science for setting you on the straight and narrow. That's rule number one, is no screens. Rule number two is a student has to ask the very first question. Ideally, students ask all the questions and just box the professors out, right? But so as you're listening, let those critical wheels turn in your head and think about what do I want to hear more about? What do I want to press them on? What am I confused about? And get ready to ask a question. And then the third rule is a suggestion, really. And so we have a reception afterwards. Usually it's down the hall. Today it's right here, and they're setting it up during the talk. So don't be thrown off if people come in with food or drinks or whatever. That's all part of the plan. But stick around, get some food, and talk to your neighbors. Okay, so usually the forum is Friday afternoons. Today it's a Thursday. And another thing that's special about today is it's our annual Constitution Day forum, because September 17th, yesterday was Constitution Day. We're observing it today. It's made possible by a generous grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities as part of their efforts to properly celebrate America's 250th anniversary. So you do a little quick math. 1776, 2026, we're coming right up. We're 249, and next July 4th is the 250th anniversary of America. Okay. That's the setup. Now let me introduce our guest. Vincent Phillip Muñoz is the Tocqueville Professor of Political Science and concurrent Professor of Law at the University of Notre Dame. So you can have him for poli-sci, you can have him for law. He's good at both. Professor Muñoz is the founding director of Notre Dame's Center for Citizenship and Constitutional Government. He writes and teaches across the fields of constitutional law, American politics, and political philosophy. And he's especially focused on religious liberty and the American founding. And that's what our talk today is going to be about, in large part, right? What did the founders have to say about religious liberty and about the relationship between church and state? He won an NEH fellowship to support his most recent book, entitled Religious Liberty and the American Founding, Natural Rights and the Original Meaning of the First Amendment Religion Clauses, which came out in 2022 from the University of Chicago Press. And I think this is pretty cool. His scholarship has been cited numerous times in Church-State Supreme Court opinions. So Justice Alito has cited him, Chief Justice Roberts, Justice Thomas in Espinoza versus Montana. I think, was that school choice? So it was about should state funding be allowed to go to schools that are like Catholic schools, basically. When he's not being cited by Supreme Court justices, he's an award-winning teacher and a popular lecturer. He grew up in my hood in the Pacific Northwest and received his BA at Claremont McKenna College, MA at Boston College, PhD back at Claremont Graduate School. As I mentioned, now he's at Notre Dame, but he's here today, so please give it up for Dr. Munoz.
Thanks so much. Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be with you today. You're too kind to say. I mean, the reason we're here on a Thursday and not a Friday, it's me. It's not you, it's me. So I coach my sons. I have an 8th grader, a 6th grader, and a 2nd grader, which means I spend most of my time driving my kids around, especially on Saturday mornings. So this Saturday morning is ballet practice and a flag football game. I'm the coach, so I couldn't miss Saturday morning. So I asked if we could do the lecture on a Thursday. So I thank you because now my wife will let me back in the house when I come home tomorrow. Thanks especially to Professors Keating, McFarland, to the staff of the Humanities Forum, to Ian. I have a special affection for Providence College. A good number of my friends are Dominicans. My son, the flag football player, his name is Dominic. So I'm especially pleased to be here with you today. Now I feel, I mean, I'm Catholic and maybe I have some Catholic guilt. I feel like I have to start with a confession. It is true, my scholarship was cited by Justice Alito in this big recent church-state case. It's true, but what you didn't say is that he cited me to criticize me. In fact, a whole portion of his opinion, it's a big opinion, I mean, he says, well, you know, no one believes any of these arguments, but there's this one scholar who does, and this is the reason why all of his work is unfounded. That's his work. So it is true I was cited, but maybe. And for the record, Alito is wrong, so yeah. Okay. This is, I've given this lecture before, but I changed it for this audience. I'm hoping to provoke a couple Dominicans. I don't see any Dominicans here, but I'm still hoping to provoke them. So I'll be very curious with your questions, and you know, tell me what you think, especially all the science majors out there. And I'm told, I don't know what flip points are, but I'm told I'm authorized to give double and triple flip points if I like your questions. So I encourage you to ask questions. Okay, today, not everyone is eager to celebrate the Declaration of Independence. We're about to have the 250th anniversary. The political left has long been skeptical of 1776. Their critique is familiar. All men are created equal didn't really include all people, especially the slaves. Didn't include women, supposedly. The Constitution did not include African Americans or women. The founders' alleged commitment to the rights of men was really cover for their economic interests. That's the famous argument of Charles Beard, the very influential progressive historian. There's a new criticism, though, and this one from the post-liberal right. Liberalism has failed because liberalism has succeeded, my colleague at Notre Dame, Pat Deneen, says. About natural rights, the philosophy professor Alistair McIntyre is probably the most famous, he died recently, the most famous Notre Dame philosophy professor, the most famous Notre Dame professor, simply. This is what Alistair McIntyre said about natural rights. I'm quoting here from his famous book, After Virtue. The truth is plain, there are no such rights. Belief in them is one with belief in witches and unicorns. So about the Declaration of Independence, Notre Dame's most famous professor says, it's all make-believe. The post-liberal argument says the political philosophy of the American founding erodes traditional morality, it undermines sound religious beliefs, it brings all the pathologies of our current culture. So I'm going to try to make the argument that both the left and the right are wrong. Okay, here's my thesis. I'm going to argue before you that the American founding was indeed animated by a revolution in political thinking, but a revolution that was not hostile to religion or religious truth. The natural rights political philosophy of the American founding, which includes all human beings, black as well as white, men as well as women, places limits on political authority in recognition of and out of deference to legitimate religious authority. And I see lots of you students are taking notes. I tell you, don't worry too much about taking notes. If you want notes from a slide, you can just email me, and I'll send you whatever you need, okay? So I'm going to advance this thesis by articulating what I call 3 revolutions of 1776. And here are the revolutions. First, the founders instituted a new understanding of the foundations of political authority. Foundation that legitimate government is based on consent. Consent is required because of equality. So that's the first revolution. Second, the founders advanced a new conception of the purposes of government, where the common good or the public good, founders, they didn't really use the term common good too much. We do, but they used the term the public good. The public good was understood as securing individuals' natural rights. And then thirdly, and this is probably the most controversial, or hopefully the most interesting thing I'll say, the founders limited the role of the state, the role of government, out of recognition of and deference to religious authority. Now let me just say, that argument, I assume, is not going to be well received by most of my colleagues at Notre Dame and here. But they're wrong too. I'm going to try to show that the American founding, properly understood, was animated both by the spirit of liberty and the spirit of religion, a philosophical and practical achievement worth understanding and to whatever extent we can, recovering today. Okay, so let me begin with the first revolution. America begins with the self-evident truth that all men are created equal. But equal in what respects? What's the significance of that equality? How would we prove that equality? This quote here is from a letter that Jefferson wrote at the end of his life. Jefferson and, has anyone seen the miniseries John Adams? Do young people, how many of you seen this miniseries? Oh, just a few of you. Did you like it? It's very good. I recommend it to you. This came out, 10 or 15 years ago. I'm sure it's streaming. I don't know who did it, but whoever did it, they actually knew something about Adams. So I mention it in part because it's worth watching. I don't know if you get flip points for it, but try. The 2 men most responsible for the Declaration of Independence are John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson for obvious reasons, he's the author. John Adams because, I don't know, maybe we're close to Massachusetts, you'll remember this, but a third of the colonists are loyalists. And a third are, not so sure or indifferent, and a third are insurrectionists. That's what they're called, insurrectionists. When you sign the Declaration of Independence, to sign the Declaration of Independence, that's an act of what? Treason. And what's the punishment for treason? Death. So getting the leading colonists to sign the Declaration of Independence was not easy. Right? I mean, you're waging war on the King of England, the most powerful man in the world. Adams is the founder most responsible for getting his other sort of leading founders to be willing to go for independence. In a way, Adams probably had a rightful claim to author the Declaration of Independence, but to his credit, he understood Jefferson would do a better job than he would, which is why Jefferson writes the first draft. Okay. This letter is written in 1826, so they're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, much like we will next year. Roger Waitman is the mayor of Washington, D.C. So Roger Waitman, who's organizing the celebration, writes to Jefferson saying, Mr. Jefferson, will you come be in Philadelphia, celebrations in Philadelphia, be with us for the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. What happens on July 4, 1826? Do you know? What happens? Yeah. Both Jefferson and Adams, the 2 men responsible for the Declaration of Independence, pass away on the 50th anniversary. An episode which, to my mind, reveals the workings of Providence and also the power of the human spirit. There's no doubt they both wanted to live to see that day. So Jefferson writes back to Roger Waitman, knowing he's about to die. And we used to think this was his last letter. And I was down in Monticello, Jefferson's home in Charlottesville a few years ago, and I asked the tour guide, do you have the letter to Roger Waitman? It's the last letter. And she said, we used to think it was the last letter. Turns out Jefferson wrote one more letter about his wine collection, which, if you know about Jefferson, it's a very Jeffersonian thing to be thinking about as you're about to die. So, but Jefferson writes this letter right before he dies. And it's not just for Roger Waitman. It's not just for the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. It's for all Americans. It's for you. It's for us today. This is Jefferson saying, look, he's Thomas Jefferson at the end of his life, reflecting on the Declaration of Independence. This is what the Declaration means, he says. Okay, this is one quote, but the most important quote. So let me read a little bit of it. He says, may the Declaration, may it be to the world what I believe it will be, to some part sooner, to others later, but finally to all, the signal arousing men to burst their chains, to assume the blessings and security of self-government. Now here's the most important part. All eyes are opened or opening to the rights of man. The general spread of the light of science has already laid open to every view the palpable truth that the mass of mankind has not been born with saddles on their back, nor a favored few booted and spurred, ready to ride them legitimately by the grace of God. Okay, horses aren't born with saddles on their back either. If you were, I mean, this probably doesn't happen here, if you were to capture a wild horse, and you wanted, it's a wild horse, I would like to use this horse, to ride it, to help me work in my fields. What do you do to the horse? What would you do to, you have to break it. I mean, think about those terms. What are you breaking? What are you breaking? It's will, right? It's spirit. Why are you doing that? Why would you break the horse? So you can control it, so you can own it, so you can use it, so you can ride it. You domesticate it. Right? Human beings can own horses. Now, is it wrong? Tell me your name. Nico? Is it wrong to break a horse? Most people don't. I mean, if you're a fancy philosophy professor, you might, but most normal people don't, right? Why can we break a horse and own it and ride it? Well, because it's a horse and you're a person, right? Jefferson's teaching is you can do that to a horse, but no person can legitimately do that to another person. That's what he's saying equality means. Why can't you do that to another person? When you ride, Nico, have you ever ridden a horse? Okay. Did you negotiate with the horse beforehand? You carry me there. What'd you do? What were you doing? You're on a ranch. I assume you were riding across the ranch to pick up a young lady to bring her out somewhere. Just go with it, Nico. This is right. So, did you negotiate with the horse? Like, I'll give you 20, like an Uber driver, I'll give you $20. No, why not? Okay, right? Because why? It's a horse. So Nico used the horse's labor. And if you own the horse, you own the horse's labor. Nico, if I say after this lecture I'm really tired, will you carry me to the dining hall? What would you say? That would be very awkward, by the way. Sorry, this is a dumb example, but yeah. Yeah. Or if I said, a better example, I said, Nico, hey, I need help mowing the lawn. You're a big, strong guy. Will you mow the lawn for me? You'd probably say, yeah, because you're a good kid, Providence. But like the 5th time I asked you every Saturday morning, at what point you're going to say, well, Professor Munoz, I'll do this, but for $50 or whatever, right? Right? I can't compel you to do that. Because you would say, well, it's my labor, right? Like I'm pushing the lawnmower, I'm getting up early. Why do you own your labor? Like if you go, I don't know, is there a lake around here? You go out to the ocean and you fish, you catch the fish. Like if you, or pick an apple off an apple tree, like no one owns the apple tree. If we just walked out of this room and you're walking down, you ladies are walking down the quad, there's no one around, and there's a $100 bill on the ground. Tell me your two names. Sorry. Catherine and, okay, that's confusing, okay. Do we have a non-Catherine in the audience? Grace? Okay, so one of the Catherines and Grace are walking down the quad, and they see a $100 bill, right? And there's no one around, no idea whose it is, and Grace sees it and says, "Look, there's a $100 bill," and then Catherine, one of the Catherines, she's like, "Oh, there's a $100 bill." Catherine runs and grabs it, puts it in her pocket. Who gets the $100 bill? Catherine gets it. Grace saw it, but Catherine gets it. Everyone for Catherine? No? I mean, Catherine was a jerk, wasn't she? I mean, sorry. But who gets the $100 bill? Because she picked it up. Okay. Everyone else basically agree? You're not so sure. Okay, so tell me your name. Sorry. Luke says, well, picking it up is an action. So she picked it up. She did work. But tell me your name. Isabel is saying, but seeing is work too. And I think everyone here would agree to the same rule. What's the rule that should govern this case? You all know it. Finders keepers. Why? When did you learn the rule finders keepers? 2 or 3? Okay, this lecture is going to go long because I'm sorry, so how many of you have kids? Okay, let me give you a lesson in parenting. I have 3 kids, as you know now. You buy your kids toys. What do they play with? They play with the box that the toy comes in. And then they play with the toy for like 20 minutes and they put it away. And they never want to play with the toy. They never put it away. It's always out, but they never play with it. When is the one moment they want to play with it? The one and only moment. When their friend comes over and sees the toy and picks it up. And then what does your kid say? Always. Mine. Who told them it was theirs? This is a bad example for me, but most of their parents aren't professors of constitutional law. But you all believe in finders keepers, don't you? Yeah? You all believe that. Why? And you all believe that whoever took the action to pick up the $100 bill, assuming you can't find its owner, should get it. Now, if they're nice, they might share it or whatever. You all believe that, right? Like if Professor McFarland says to Catherine, you found $100 bills. Oh, you're in my class. I get it. Would any of you buy that argument? No. So you all believe this. But why do you believe it? Like when you get your first paycheck, who gets the money? At least 72% of it. You do, right? Or another example, who's going to get to pick your spouse? Nico? Oh, yeah. So why, because you all believe you own your own labor. You don't own your body, actually. You own your labor, your work. Everything this quote is saying is, every human being by nature owns their own labor. When someone else owns your labor, like if Nico owned my labor, that's the very definition of slavery. You work, I eat. That's how Lincoln put it. It's not that there's some law that the state of Rhode Island passed that says you own your own labor. It is a claim of natural justice. That's what we mean by equality, Jefferson says. That's what he means when he says, no one has born with a saddle on it. There are no natural masters, no natural slaves. No natural rulers, no natural subjects. That's what we mean by equality. If we're all equal, how does one person gain authority over another? What's the next step in the argument? Do you see? By consent, right? If you see that, we can skip the next 10 minutes of the lecture. So, everyone see that connection? Okay. So, but we have to stop and pause for a moment. Why should we own our own labor, or why should Nico get to choose his wife, not someone else? Why ought we have dominion over our own lives? We just assume we do, but why? I mean, how many think Nico's going to make a good choice? Maybe, we'll see, you know. But we would all say, Nico, no, at the end of the day, Nico's going to have to make that choice himself. Right. And if you don't think that, think of it this way. Would any of you marry someone that said to you, oh, I want, yeah, we got to get married. I got to marry you. My parents told me I have to. Right? I mean, there's some people saying, well, tell me more about the parents. Like, what does the dad do? Sorry. Okay. Let me turn to another founder. This is James Wilson. Do you know who James Wilson is? Some of you? Anyone from Pennsylvania? Do you learn about James Wilson in Pennsylvania? Not even in Pennsylvania. James Wilson was like the leading founder, besides Ben Franklin, from Pennsylvania. Signed the Declaration of Independence. Signed the Declaration, signed the Constitution, Supreme Court Justice. James Wilson, he's like a AAA founder. He was really good, he just didn't quite, he's not a Washington or Madison or Hamilton. Okay. James Wilson, in 1790, gave these lectures, 1790, 1792. They're called the Lectures on Law, and they're long. They're like 1,000 pages. He's sort of the American Blackstone. And Wilson talks about equality, too. And, I mean, we just had 2 sentences from Jefferson. Wilson goes on length about why are human beings equal? And this is one of the key passages here. I won't read it all, but this is how Wilson goes. This is his method of, he says, look at human beings. Look at what we are, all right? We have certain desires, or desires for our own happiness. We have certain affections. We're social beings. We care for our friends, our family, those who are close to us. We have intellectual powers. It says, look at human nature and how we are created. A being that is created as we are is a being that's created to be free. I mean, look, the horse, when Nico breaks the horse, is he doing violence to the horse? Well, you could say in some sense. Like, he should treat the horse humanely, right? Feed and care and provide it for it. But is a domesticated horse, are horses meant to be domesticated? Well, in a sense, yes. They're actually perfect, or if that's too abstract, think of how many of you have a dog? Is your dog happy when you come home? I mean, your dog at one point was a wild dog, or could have been a wild dog. But now he's a domesticated dog. She's a domesticated dog. Have you done violence to the nature of the dog? No. I mean, not if you take care of it and feed it and are proper to the dog. But what if can you have a pet human being? No. Why not? Because of human nature. Okay? We're beings that are meant to be free, right? And he says, after examining human nature, he says, if all this be true, right, that we are the way what we see, if all this is true, the undeniable consequence is that he, that is every human being, has a right to exert these powers for the accomplishment of these purposes in such a manner and upon such objects as his inclination and judgment shall direct. This right is natural liberty. It's a fancy way of saying Nico gets to choose the woman he pursues to get married. I mean, she may or may not say yes, but you get to choose, right? Because of the type of being he is. Okay. Why do I emphasize this? The founder's account, Thomas Jefferson's account, James Wilson's account, and these are just emblematic. The founder's account of human nature and natural liberty are not Hobbesian. You read Hobbes here, right? Even the scientists, you have to read Hobbes at some point, right? Unlike Hobbes, the founders do not take natural liberty to mean it's not grounded in our passions alone. It's not grounded in the fear of violent death alone. The founders say natural liberty is grounded upon what is low. They do recognize our passion, but also what is high. Our ability to apprehend and know the truth and live accordingly. So the founders aren't Hobbesian. In fact, let me go a little bit further. Unlike Hobbes, the founders say natural rights are part of the natural law. The natural moral law is just the law of right and wrong. The natural law is it's okay to own a horse. It's not okay to own a human being. The natural law says human beings are meant to be free. So to treat them as if they're not free, to enslave them, is wrong. Those are all precepts of the natural law. Our natural rights are part of the natural law, but there's no natural right to violate the law of nature. So all rights by nature are bounded. We misunderstand what rights are. We think if you have a right to do something, you can do anything. Like the right to free speech means you can say anything. But we know that's not true. If you lie about someone, if Nico goes back to his dorm tonight and says, that was the worst lecture I ever heard, I can't believe it was such a waste of time, and says false and slanderous things like that, it's slander, right? Or libel. Libel is lying about someone to impugn their reputation. Libel is not protected by the First Amendment because there's no right to libel someone. Or the classic example is yelling fire in a crowded theater. That's not an exception to freedom of speech. That's not part of the freedom of speech. Obscenity, right? Or I think of your dorm room. At what point, I mean, imagine like all the faculty, staff just disappeared for a weekend. And it was just you students, no authorities. But imagine it, like all of a sudden many people started to become very interested in this lecture. Right? So imagine this was happened for several weeks. At some point in the evening on a Thursday night, like what time would you have to be quiet? 10 p.m.? Okay, everyone agree? Roughly? On a weekday? So maybe later on a weekend? It's unreasonable. Like if you just say, well, it's my room, I'm just playing loud music in my room, I can do anything I want in my room. Well, that's not true, right? You can't use your room in such a way to disturb your neighbors. Just because it's your property doesn't mean you can use it in any way you want. The right of property in the law, we call this nuisance law. Right? Like you can't burn tires in your backyard, right, for all sorts of reasons. So all natural rights have natural limits. Natural rights are part of the natural law, and a right to do something doesn't mean you can do anything. It means you can do anything that's reasonable. Reasonable means within the boundaries of the natural moral law. Okay? Okay, let me go on. Okay. That all human beings are by nature equal means we all by nature possess dominion over our own lives, including our own labor. That has a specific implication for the institution of political authority. Given that no human being by nature has a right to rule, legitimate political authority arises only via consent. Well, it might be in every man's interest, every person's interest, to be a citizen of a decent political order. Given each of our natural rights, natural right to liberty, no person can be bound to a specific political order except through consent. Now, if you have questions about consent, let's return to that in the Q&A, okay? There's lots of interesting things there. Okay. So that's the first revolution. Okay. Let me say one more word, and I introduced this just to provoke some of the Dominicans. The founders' reasoning, which I just explained, presumes that human beings ought to be treated in accordance with the kind of being we are, which is perceptible in our unique attributes and capabilities, our capacities. The founders, in other words, adopt Thomas Aquinas' ontology, that goodness and being are convertible terms, that human excellence is found by uncovering what we truly are. The founders derived an ought, human beings ought to be free, from an is. This is what human nature is. It's designed for freedom. So what most distinguishes the founders from classical thinkers is not a different approach to nature or natural law, but the founders' appreciation and embrace of equal human freedom as a central aspect of the natural law. So the first revolution, it turns out, has a classical metaphysical foundation. Okay. The second revolution. Second revolution relates to the purposes of government. As the right of natural liberty follows from our equal capacities to direct our own lives, the principle of consent follows from equality. Consent alone, however, is not necessary for legitimate government. Consent is a necessary but not sufficient proposition for political legitimacy. Good government must also, or legitimate government must be directed towards its proper ends. And the primary end of government is the protection of natural rights. This, as I said, is the second revolution. Government, the purpose of government is directed towards protection of rights. Let me, maybe for the sake of time, I'll go through this relatively quickly. This last quote is a little bit small. This is an essay that James Madison wrote in 1792 called his Essay on Property. He says, "A just government is one in which impartially secures to every man whatever is his own." There's a couple of things to note about that. It presumes that by nature you have things that are your own. You have a right to property, your labor, not because the government says you do, but because by nature. That's what we talked about. Okay. That follows from human equality. But the role of government is to secure those natural rights. What does that mean? Well, it means that the founders' conception of government is different from that which developed in 20th century America. Influential progressives, Herbert Crowley, you might know the magazine The New Republic. Herbert Crowley was the founding editor of The New Republic, or political leaders such as Woodrow Wilson, especially FDR. The founders, unlike FDR and modern progressives, did not hold that a fundamental purpose of government is to provide directly for the material needs of the citizenry, to ameliorate all unfortunate conditions, or to equalize material resources. The The founders understood the role of government to be simply securing the conditions, including the economic conditions, that would allow Americans to be responsible for themselves, to employ their natural rights, to provide for themselves, their families, and those under their care. The founders aimed at the virtue of responsibility. That's the quintessential modern virtue. That is the virtue of America. There's a critique that, this gets back to my opening statement about the post-liberals, that America doesn't aim at any virtues, and therefore it's deficient. That's incorrect. The virtue the founders aimed for was responsibility. Interesting, not one of Aristotle's virtues. A responsible person takes care of their own life and the lives of the people they are responsible for. And the really responsible people also take care for their surrounding community. We know this. It was just 9/11. Think of all those first responders that didn't hesitate to go up into the towers. I mean, that was heroic. But they understood they had a responsibility to do that. That's a real virtue. It's courage, it may perhaps even magnanimity. But everyone can exercise the responsibility, the virtue of responsibility in your everyday life. That's what a limited government is, that's the good the limited government is supposed to secure. So respect for and recognition of individuals' responsibilities for their own well-being, which includes moral responsibility for one's neighbors, led the founders to conclude that legitimate political authority is not and cannot be tasked with securing every element of the good life for you. Do you see how responsibility is connected to freedom? It's not just that the government is there. I mean, we say the purpose of government is to secure liberty. That's true. That is but why does the government try to secure liberty for you, and just liberty? So you can then exercise the virtue of responsibility. That's the virtue that government indirectly attempts to secure. Note that you cannot secure responsibility for someone. The nature of the virtue itself is that the person themselves has to do it. Okay. Perhaps, and most fundamentally, the founders held that a government is not and cannot be responsible for you to perform your religious obligations. The government cannot save your soul. This is a revolution in political thinking. It's also the third revolution I want to talk about. Political freedom, or the idea that the role of politics, the role of government, is to secure liberty. So political freedom and the proper limitations on the state's authority do not imply indifference to religion. No, politics must remain limited because the nature of religious truth and the recognition of the politics must remain limited because of the nature of religious truth and in recognition of the proper domain of religious authority. So this, as I said earlier, this is probably the most controversial thing I'll say today. This quote is from the 1776 Virginia Declaration of Rights. Madison, this is written by James Madison. Madison didn't put it this way, but I think we can capture his thinking in the following way. What he was getting at is an omniscient and omnipotent God that created us the way we are would settle for nothing less from us than our full devotion. Let me say that again. An omnipotent and omniscient God, a creator God, a God who created Nico with the freedom he has. Presumably, God wants everything we can offer him. What's everything that Nico can give? Worship, devotion, adoration, and conscientious conviction. How do we know that that's what we were created for? from how we are created. And if that seems too obscure, think of marriage. What do you want from your spouse? Would you ever settle for someone who said, I'll be devoted with you, I won't cheat for you, I'll provide, I'll be a good husband or I'll be a good wife, but I'll never really love you? And you say, well, why not? What's wrong with me? And they just say, it's just not there. And it never will be. Would you marry that person? Why not? I mean, it's tough out there. Why wouldn't you? Why would you resist that? As you probably should resist that. But why? What is it? I mean, they can be tall and handsome and rich or beautiful. Father has season tickets. You fill in the blank. Vacation home, but they'll never love you. Not that they'll be terrible. Why would you not be satisfied with that? Because what do you really want? What you really want is someone who will give themselves to you. And you want everything, right? Isn't that what you want? Because that's what you deserve. You deserve everything. Because you're going to give that to them. That's what marriage actually is. Now, if we want that from each other, and we want that because that's how we've been created, what does the Creator want from you? Presumably, He wants everything. And so the worship, like marriage, must be entered into and done freely. This is the root of religious freedom. But this idea, which we grasp, I mean, it's no secret that Christ is always talking about marriage, right? This means, I mean, what does the government have? At the end of the day, if you get a speeding ticket, if Nico's riding his horse too fast and breaks the speed limit, and he gets a ticket for reckless horse riding, and he doesn't pay the ticket, what happens to Nico? Or if he doesn't pay his taxes, what happens to him? Well, he gets a warning, might get a bigger fine. He doesn't pay that fine. At the end of the day, what's going to happen to Nico? He goes to jail. At the end of the day, what the state has is force. And force can't make you worship truly, which means the state can't save your soul, which means the proper domain of political authority can't include encompassing religious authority. That all follows from how we are created as free and equal beings. Do you see the revolutionary implications? Now, it also means the state can't encompass religious authority. We limit the state, this is what I mean by, we limit the authority of the state on account of the nature of religion. Who's in charge? Who is supposed to help us save our souls? The church. So out of recognition of the nature of religious devotion, religious truth, and the nature of religious authority, which comes not from man but from God, the state limits its own authority. That's the third revolution. Okay. I could say, I can say, and prepared to say a lot more on that. I'll just add one. This was also to poke a needle at some of the Dominicans I know. Those who say that the state should follow the dictates of religious authority, the state should take its direction for religious authority, the state in some way should be integrated with religious authority, have one question they never quite answer. How will the state know what the true religious authority is? Because as far as I know, Christian theology does not say that state authorities are given the grace to know the true religion. Church authorities might receive grace and the guidance of the Holy Spirit. But I don't know the gospel passage or the epistle that says state authorities are endowed with grace. And if they're not, how will we know, how could we ever believe that state authorities will know the true religion from which they are to take direction? In fact, it's contrary to human experience in human history that will actually happen. Okay, I've gone way too long. Let me wrap up here. Because political authority does not possess the mandate of divine authority, because it must be founded on principles accessible to human reason alone. Above all, the truth that all human beings are created equal, and therefore legitimate government is instituted via consent, our first revolution. The basic principles of political right, what I've called the revolutions of 1776, ordain politics to the protection of our natural rights, the second revolution, and proper political principles recognize the authority of churches and individuals to do churches to do their work, individuals to do the worship they are ordained and called to do, the third revolution. This is the legacy for which the signers of the Declaration of Independence pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. We honor their legacy, accept our rightful patrimony as Americans by understanding these revolutionary principles. Principles that still make America, in Lincoln's words, the last best hope on earth. Principles that, at least I think, make the Declaration of Independence worth celebrating. Thank you very much. Okay, I went long. I feel like I owe Nico and Grace, and especially Catherine, especially Catherine, the first question if they want it. But any students? Okay, please, yes.
Hi, I have couple questions, but my first one is, George Carlin, I think it was, once said that rights are not rights if they can be taken away. All we've ever had are privileges. Do you agree with that sentiment, or do you think he's painting with too broad a brush?
That's funny. No, I don't agree. He's wrong. No, I mean, it's true rights can be taken away. I mean, why did we have the revolution? We thought our rights weren't being protected. So they can be taken away, right? We call that unjust government. I mean, the main reason we have representation, that we have elections, that we vote for school board, for your member of Congress, for the president, the main reason we vote for these people, that we have a system, a democratic system, it's actually a Republican system, but a democratic system, is to protect our rights. That if we elect Nico and he uses his power badly, right, passes all sorts of bad laws that take away our rights, we kick him out of office. But the fact that now there are two different types of rights. There are natural rights, which you have in accordance of your human nature, and then acquired rights. So, I mean, most of you are going to get a license from the state at some point, right? If you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, or I don't know. Nico, what are you going to be? Sorry, I mean, I don't know Nico. I'm just picking. What do you want to be? Okay, very good. You don't have to get a license for that. You got to get a license to get married, right? Let's say Nico's going to be a cosmetologist. He has to get a cosmetology license. And when you have a cosmetology license, then you have, in a way, the right to cut hair. Right? So there are acquired rights. The driver's license, you have a right to drive. Right? But there are natural rights. And those rights don't exist because of government. In fact, we have government to protect our natural rights.
First of all, thank you for giving this amazing lecture. So I wanted to address your last point. Not that I disagree with the separation of church and state, but there's also, what is it? It's pluralist society. So like the government doesn't endorse like secular, and it doesn't endorse a confessional state. And so there's also the breakdown of pluralist society going one way or the other. And so would you say that confessional states are wrong based on what you said about like the separation of church and state? I don't know. Like, do you understand my question?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
That's the implication of my argument. So, trying to provoke those Dominicans.
Professor Munoz, thank you for a wonderful and very, very exciting talk. So I just got one question for you. I was intrigued by what you said where government gives us liberty, and from liberty we derive responsibility. So I'm wondering what...
Can I just rephrase that?
Sure.
Government secures our liberty so we can, which facilitates, allows us, gives us a space to be responsible. So it's not that government gives us liberty. This is to connect, tell me your name. Yeah. It's connected to Maeve's question. So we have liberty by nature, right? The role of government is to secure it. But I know that's not, I'm not disagreeing with that, the spirit of your question. I'm just clarifying. Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thank you for the clarification. But with this sort of responsibility to ourselves, others in the community, like you said, how did we deviate so far from that so much as to, for example, commit a shooting in a public space for someone preaching their mind, or an attack like 9/11, or these recent acts of violence? You know what?
No, I'm glad. I mean, I'm glad you're bringing the Charlie Kirk episode up, which I should have started my comments with. I mean, it's just a terrible thing. It was an attack on really everyone at the, whether you liked him or not. I mean, it was at a university doing the things you should do at a university. So, how do we get there? Well, I mean, that's actually not so hard. Look, human beings are the in-between being, right? James Wilson says our dignity and perfection lies in our voluntary actions. That is, our voluntary actions, choosing, understanding what's right and wrong, and choosing to do what's right. But just look at yourself and look at me. We often do what's not right. That's the human condition. And sometimes some of us do things that are really evil and really wrong. And we're never, I mean, as much as we don't want that to be the case, we're imperfect beings. There's always going to be evil in the world. Right? We try to minimize it, we try to prevent it, but it's utopian to ever think we can get over that. Now what we want to do is create a society in which we are encouraged to use our freedom well, and that those who suffer from whatever reasons, especially now, mental health reasons, that they get the help they need. So we want to encourage a society that minimizes this and have prudent laws. I mean, no one wants guns in the hands of dangerous people. We disagree fundamentally on what that means and how to achieve that, get to that purpose. But there's actually a lot of underlying agreement. I think almost everyone agrees, look, people should be allowed to defend themselves in general. They just disagree on, are these means necessary, right? Dangerous people shouldn't have lethal force. We just disagree. We don't actually disagree on the ends. We disagree on the means. Those are prudential questions. It's very hard to know. I hope that answers your question, though. Yeah. I mean, the real answer is original sin. That's the fundamental answer.
Thank you for coming and giving this very thought-provoking lecture. My question for you is, you talked about natural rights have natural limits as seem reasonable and prudent. Is it your impression that this will be a shared experience and understanding, just as we all know we inherently have natural rights, or is it a more subjective and individual thing? Because I'm thinking about your metaphor, and while it might be, courteous, respectful to your neighbor's natural rights not to play music after 10 p.m. without any sort of enforcement mechanism. Having lived in a freshman dorm, I can confidently tell you it's more of a suggestion.
Yeah, no, that's very good. That's a nice, I like the question and I like the way you asked it. So we all agree, we tend to agree on principles. One should not be rude. One should not use your dorm room in ways that are unreasonable. One should be quiet when it's appropriate to be quiet. Almost all of us agree on those principles. Where we disagree is what's reasonable. You say 9 o'clock, I say 9 o'clock, you say 11 o'clock. Right? It's actually not a disagreement on principle. It's a disagreement on this particular situation. I mean, here, there's a problem or difficulty with the natural law. I mean, we all agree on the principle, the natural law principle, be fair. We disagree on what fairness is. The natural law tends to be general. This is a deficiency. I mean, or you could say it's an opportunity. Aquinas says we participate, human law is our participation in the eternal law. And what does he mean, we participate? Well, we got to come up rules to figure out when you need to be quiet. Should it be 9 o'clock or should it be 11 o'clock? We just say it's 10 o'clock. Does the natural law dictate 10 o'clock? No, the natural law dictates don't unreasonably bother your neighbor. But human law, or dorm law, comes into being because we just need to agree. And once we have the dorm laws, then you can say at 10:01, knock on the door, hey, you're supposed to be quiet now, but not at 9:59. And so it coordinates our behavior. So are we all going to agree in the applications? Definitely not. Think of, the examples are endless. How much pollution should we allow into the air? Everyone agrees, actually, we should have a healthy environment. And that general principle. Polluters should be paid to, suffer penalties if they pollute, or paid to pollute. But we disagree on how much. But those are dictates of prudence, dictates of reason. And it's going to depend on circumstance. It's going to depend on all sorts of circumstances. Even the quiet hours, a Friday night versus a Tuesday night. Friday night during finals, as opposed to do you have a day, Notre Dame, everyone's favorite day. Finals end on Friday, but you don't have to leave the dorm until Sunday, which makes Saturday the best day of the semester. Nothing to do, and all your friends. There are no quiet hours on that Saturday, and that's not unreasonable. Does that get to your question?
Thank you very much for this very enlightening talk. And I'm trying to think through an issue that you raised about the confessional state. On some level, every child is raised by their parents, and the idea is that they're going to cultivate a certain amount of virtue, and that virtue will be instilled upon them by the parent, and that will involve a certain amount of coercion and all of these things to develop these virtues, right?
Certainly true of my household, yes.
Right. So a medieval idea in Thomas, for example, is that there are layers, right? You've got the individual the rational faculty is in control of the body. The head of the household is in control of the family. And then the figurehead, the monarch or the father or the head of state is tasked with trying to create some sort of environment that's that will lead to the cultivation of best virtue for that state. So it's true that coercion is bad because a person cannot completely exercise free will, but what if we're in this, if you will, a present state where the situation of this radical freedom is not conducive to the cultivation of virtue at all? and does not allow for the maturation of the individual to freely choose. So I'm trying to, I haven't fully developed this idea,
no,
but yeah.
Two separate things.
Yeah.
So let me take the first. But I mean, think of how tell me your name. Chris. So think of how Chris started, right? The example of parent and child. Now, if you push that, and some say the king is like the parental authority of his kingdom, but that means, now think about that. That means the citizens are like what? Children. It's to treat citizens like children, not to treat them like what? Equal adults. Now, if you actually have a citizenry that is like children, well, then I suppose that would be proper. Right? And there are certain human circumstances where you might have that situation, right? But it's a deviation from actually what normal functioning human beings can be. Okay. Now, what about the other side, where now it's not that the king or the monarch or the ruler has been like a parent and like too restrictive. It's totally permissive. I mean, I don't know, maybe some of you must have had friends, you know, when you're 13, 14, 15, 16, and the parents have no rules. Does that turn out very well in hindsight? You've all seen this, right? Like sooner or later, there's a crash and burn. And you could say maybe that's where our society is closer to that. Wherever we are, we're closer to that. But look, in the founders' understanding, the role of government is to protect natural rights. All natural rights have natural limits. Those limits are the law of nature. What is good positive law? This connects to the last question. A good positive law is an ordinance of the community, a dorm law or a Rhode Island law or a federal law that approximates and determines the natural law. So freedom can be threatened by both having too much law, right, it's a tyranny, or not enough law. Right? So the libertinism of the current moment, and you can see this just to go to my domain. So in the 60s, so it's longer deviation, footnote to the answer to your question. In 1957, the rule of pornography or obscenity was the community could make a picture or a document illegal, prohibited, if that document or picture, if it fell into the hands of the child, it would corrupt the child. It's called the Hicklin test. It comes from England. The Hicklin test was anything that would corrupt a minor, if a minor happened to get it, could be prohibited by the community. So obscenity, pornography, bad language, all of that a community could make illegal. And starting in 1957, the Supreme Court started to roll those rules back to the point where some Supreme Court justices said, freedom of press and freedom of speech protect everything. You can publish anything, any picture. Now, these guys were wrong about the law and foolish. The First Amendment protects the freedom of speech. The freedom of speech or freedom of the press is the freedom to say things that are reasonable. They just misunderstood. It was a combination of a misunderstanding of our natural rights tradition plus the beginnings of the sexual revolution. And so, if you want to know what's happened, we failed to understand this tradition. Can I say one more thing? Where I thought Nico was going to go, like how did we get here? That was kind of your question. But you were thinking at an individual level. Starting in the really starting in the 1830s in the South, John C. Calhoun, but also in the 1910s and 1920s, there was an idea, first it was really Calhoun. The idea was, no, we're not born naturally free. Freedom is achieved through history, through the state. Freedom is an achievement. So the state gives us freedom. And political development is the state being so sophisticated that it can create the conditions of freedom. Now, Calhoun added a racial component to it. Slavery, he said, was a positive good because slavery is how you get freedom. And if that seems, what? I mean, think about what we're doing. I mean, how expensive is this lecture? I mean, trust me, the honorarium is not very much. But think about what's necessary for this. We've just spent 90 minutes together. How expensive was that? Well, first of all, we have this building, which is quite nice, at this institution. How did Providence College come into being? And what do you students do? You're here for 4 years, some of you 5 years. What are you doing for these 4 years and 5 years? I mean, what are you doing? Sitting around, reading books, listening to lectures. I mean, you're not doing anything productive for the economy, right? The amount of wealth required to have a university so you can sit around. I mean, most kids, and Nico, how old are you? Most 20-year-olds in human history that look like Nico are fighting wars or training to fight wars or plowing fields so they could survive. That's what human history is. It's not Nico sitting, listening to a lecture, listening to someone who gets paid just to sit around and talk. The amount of wealth required for us to spend this time together is almost unimaginable. Calhoun thought you could only have that wealth if you had slavery. Others thought you could only have that freedom if people who in charge, who ran the government, granted it to you. The idea that rights are created by the government, that gets back to the Carlin question, right? Took hold among intellectuals, first in a racial component in the 1840s, 1850s, and then especially in the 1920s. And this is what Woodrow Wilson believed, that freedom was a product of human ingenuity and creativity and development, not that it was an endowment from our Creator. I mean, we'll have to do a whole second lecture to go through that. I feel like I'm abusing your time, so if
We got time for one quick question to wrap things up.
Thank you, Dr. Munoz. I'm interested in the semantics of natural law, that being the default, a natural moral law. Do you think, in your opinion, do you think that in the founders' opinion, they knew what they meant by natural law, that these were God-given, Or are these laws things that we can arrive at by simply the faculties of reason, by tracing things back, doing a whole reasoning exercise? I guess those two aren't actually mutually exclusive, though. They can be given by God and can arrive at them reason. But I feel like there's a very careful dance people play. They say natural law, while in our hearts, that we just know that means God-given. So I don't know if there's actually a question in here. Just what do you negotiate with that?
Let me guess at where your question might be going. Would it be, can you have the idea of a natural law without a creator God? And I can rephrase it if that seems too obscure. Why should you respect nature? So you should say, well, okay, so we're equal, but why should I be satisfied with that? Why shouldn't I aspire to make us unequal? Why shouldn't I aspire to dominate? Why shouldn't I exert my will over your will? Okay, so Grace saw the $100, and Catherine ran and picked it up, and I just went over and I took it. because I could. I mean, people don't actually think like this, except on the basketball court. You see this sometimes. Do you play basketball? Well, there's sometimes when I used to play basketball, and I used to play with the students, and believe it or not, I was actually pretty good. And it got, there'd be some punk in my class, and I thought he said dumb things all semester, and then we'd be playing basketball, and I would break him down, and I enjoyed that. And then I'd start telling him, I'm going to do this to you, and you're not going to be able to stop it, and then I'd do it. And then I'd tell his friends, watch, I'm going to do this to him, and I'd do it. And I'll be honest, that's deeply satisfying. Well, not actually. It was really uncharitable, really mean-spirited. And then I graded him badly, and it's really mean of me, right? But we can't deny there's something attractive about that. There's something attractive about trying to transcend nature. Have you read The Republic? The first book of The Republic? This is just Thrasymachus' position. Or the Gorgias, this is Callicles. And it's the same question, why respect nature? Well, one answer, the most thorough answer, is because there's why respect your nature? Because you're a creature and there's a creator. And everything he created is good. That's the most thorough answer. But I will say, Plato and Aristotle, if you keep on reading the Republic, Socrates defeats Thrasymachus. And then the book goes on, right? Because Adimantus and Glaucon want to really be convinced. And their question to Socrates is, why shouldn't we try to be tyrants like Thrasymachus? And the answer, it's a complicated book, but here's what we know. Plato, too, and Aristotle, too, thought we ought to respect nature. And they weren't Christian. So it's not just Christianity or Judeo-Christianity. The Greeks arrived at that answer too. And I think I'm not going to say I fully understand Plato's answer. But here's one part of Aristotle's answer I do understand. The tyrant doesn't have friends. If you're known to be an untrustworthy person, you can never have friends. So a fundamental reason, maybe not the fundamental reason, a fundamental reason to respect the natural law is because that's how friendship is possible. And if you've ever had a true friend, you know that there is nothing more valuable. So human experience, not just Genesis, counsel respecting nature. These were phenomenally good questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming out. Thank you for giving Dr. Munoz applause. Over there, there's a reception.